On today's episode, we take a hard look at when and why the flash of your lure matters. We discuss the single most important feature of a Neko Rig with some help from Elite Series Pro Easton Fothergill. We get to see who is your favorite professional fishing league right now, and we discuss the importance of vertical versus horizontal action and drawing power in the wintertime. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to an absolutely jam-packed episode of the Tackle Talk podcast here on this fine Tuesday. We've got an awesome show for you. I feel like I say that a lot, but I promise this one is a good one. We've got a great main topic for you all. We also have all three of our in-show segments, the pro tip, the fishing pole, and the mailbag all lined up and ready to go. But before we get into everything, I just want to give a really quick shout out to the fellas over at Bass After Dark. About a week and a half ago now from when you're listening to this episode, I had the pleasure of hopping on for, either the third or fourth time that I've been lucky enough to head over and do an episode of Bass After Dark. And it's always a fun time because you get to be a little bit more off the cuff and we get to explore some topics and some opinions that I probably wouldn't normally voice here on Tackle Talk. So I'll drop a few snippets in here really fast so you can hear what a little bit of that sounded like and some of the many topics that we discussed over at Bass After Dark.
Let me start with this. Andrew, the statement from AI was pro bass fishing will become more entertainment than sport. Just off the cuff, do you agree with that statement or disagree with that statement?
Yeah, when I first heard that, my mind immediately jumped to yes, but then I had to sit there and think about why it was yes so fast. And I kept, I danced around it for a little bit, and what I kept coming back to is this feeling that substance doesn't sell anymore. That is not, and the fishing industry, old school, is very much like it's about the substance. We fight this fight all the time. You talked about it earlier in the episode where we both run shows that I think we put a lot of effort into and we try really hard, and there's hours of prep and all this stuff that takes so much time. We're not just flipping on a microphone and BS, and this stuff that we do, both of us, does not have the mass appeal that some of these things that take 30 seconds to do on it. Like, take for instance, let's take two videos. You have one video on the internet that is 17 minutes long, and it is like the most in-depth look at 17 micronutrients and highland reservoirs and the biological significance that has on the growth of black bass or something. And then you have another video that is filmed on an iPhone 14 by a 12-year-old arguing with a 60-year-old lady about whether or not he's allowed to fish an HOA pond. And you tell me which one gets way more attention, way more views, and that's what media is about in the end game. It's eyeballs. So that's the world we live in now, where you can't bank on substance anymore. You have to be, and you use the word entertaining. I think that's what ChatGPT used, and it depends on what you call entertaining. Like, entertaining meant something 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that it doesn't mean now. Now it means, can you hold my attention for 30 seconds until I scroll to the next video? Like, that's the world we live in now. So I think that was, like, big picture to start out, was that it's a shame and I wish it wasn't that way. But now being good at something, or being proficient, or like in an angler's case, being at the top of the AOY or the top of the standings is not enough anymore. And so I think that's going to trickle into, when you talk about what does fishing look like in the future, then you have to start to talk about what does broadcast look like? What does, traditional media turn into? Because the days of just being a top tier analyst and being able to explain what's going on, that doesn't have mass appeal anymore. And if you want to survive and thrive and grow, then you have to do kind of like what we've seen it in ESPN and Fox Sports and all those. I mean, there's a reason that College Game Day has Pat McAfee on it now. Yes. And Big Noon Kickoff has the Barstool guys on it now. Are they, the most high level analysts? No. Do they know what's going on half the time? No, but they're entertaining by today's standards. And I think that's what fishing will have to embrace and move toward, or else they're going to die a slow, painful death, I think.
If they bring Stephen A. Smith into bass fishing, I will run every rod tip in my eyeballs on the internet live.
Okay, so there you go. If you want to go listen to that whole thing, you can head over and check out the Bass After Dark YouTube channel. Ken, Brian, Nathan, the whole crew over there, they're great. The episodes are always fun. And then after our little 20-minute slot segment there, right afterwards, they had Matt Pangrack of BTL on, they had our friend Drew Gill on, and more. So I will leave the link to that episode in the show notes here, just in case you guys want to go check that out. All right, everybody. Next up here on the show today, I want to spend a few minutes talking about something that I think is either taken for granted a lot of times in fishing lures or just sort of skimmed over, but I don't think it should be, and that's the flash of your fishing lure. Now, what comes to mind when you think of the flash of your overall bait? Well, for me, the first thing that I think of, like when you say flash, just word association for me, is the dangling back and forth fluttering of like a double willow spinnerbait. As simple and straightforward as a bait gets, a standard spinnerbait, just chuck and wind, two willow blades just spinning and playing off of each other, flashy as can be. And it's one of the most proven fish catchers of all time. Why? Well, I guess you could argue that the only thing that makes an actual spinnerbait different from a regular jig is the flash. It's quite literally just a jig, like lead head with skirt material and a single hook attached to a wire that has blades on it. Those blades are your difference between swimming a jig and a spinnerbait. Flash and vibration. But what are some other good examples of flash? Well, let's talk about something a little bit more subtle than a spinnerbait. Let's take something like an inline spinner, the often forgot or maligned single blade inline spinner, a rooster tail, a Mepps, a Panther Martin, something like that. What draws those fish in to that inline spinner? Is it the tic-tac shaped plastic or wooden body or the teeny tiny treble hooks with a little bit of dressing on it? No. It's the flash. That flash and vibration of the single blade spinning around that single wire form core is what gets those fish going. It's painfully simple, yet again, it's one of the most proven fish catchers of all time. But keep on going, right? What's one of the most popular, I'm going to put air quotes here, quote unquote, game-changing lures of the past 20 years? That is almost certainly a chatterbait. Well, what separates a chatterbait, or another name for it, a bladed jig, from a regular jig? Don't think about it too hard, right? It's in the name, the blade. So what does that blade do? Again, it vibrates and it flashes. Vibration and movement is the other piece of this equation, and we often focus on it, right? The movement of your bait in the water, or how it feels when we're working that bait, how much water resistance there is from that bait. It's also kind of how we detect bites sometimes, like with a chatterbait, you have a bite when it stops chattering or stops vibrating. It's also how we control the speed of that lure. But just as much as a chatterbait blade or a spinnerbait blade or a rooster tail blade is producing vibration, it's also producing flash. And the presence of, or absence of, I guess, the flash can make a ton of difference in your success that day. So I want to spend a little time talking about why I think flash is important. There's two main reasons I want to hit on why I think flash matters. First is because it might be the most natural look that a predatory fish gets at its prey in certain scenarios. Like, have you ever looked at a shad ball just scatter when you scare it, or you roll up on it, or you cast on top of it? When those shad flee out of that shad ball, I don't know about you, but I can't see individual shad in that ball moving that fast. All I see is the reflection off of some of those shad due to whatever light source is available at the time, most notably the sun. So on sunny days, those shad move and scatter, and all I see is like a few hundred camera flashes that go off in a millisecond in different directions. So there are definitely situations, a lot of them actually, I would say, where to me, a human, and my eyes at least, flash is the only indicator of a bait fish's location, not like the true bait fish profile with correct coloring and correct movement. It's too fast. It's too instant. It's a flash and then they're gone. Now, can a predatory fish see and analyze more at that speed? Yes, probably. But as I try to rationalize the importance of flash to myself, that's something that I consider. Sometimes in the real world scenarios, all I can see from the boat or from the shore or from my kayak is the flash of those bait fish as they flee and nothing else. Now, I would say the other reason that I think flash matters quite a bit is because of its ability to just cut through the noise. When a fish is looking around underwater, I have to imagine there's a lot competing for his attention, even more so than for us humans above the water, right? Because underwater, not only do you have everything normal to see, like all of the fish and the plants and the wood, the rocks, the leaves that are under there, the trash, anything that could physically be in the water, but you also have to think about things that are unique to the water itself. So light refraction, glare, bubbles, and I think a big one is clarity. Because we take for granted that like 99% of the time up here in the air world that humans live in, we're not dealing with impaired vision due to visibility loss a lot of times. About the only time that I think we can probably relate to that is if you are somewhere that is really smoky or a really foggy environment. The easiest way for me to relate to a fish dealing with water visibility is to think in terms of like the foggiest day you can think of. So like in very stained or very dirty water, that fish is probably in the most intense fog that you've ever seen in your actual life. Like you can't see but a few feet in front of you. That's what that fish is dealing with in terms of visibility loss when the water is dirtier than normal or after a big rain or flood or anything like that. So if you, a human, are dealing with foggy conditions on the road when you're driving, let's say, what do? You turn on your fog lights so that other cars can see you a little easier. A bright light source helps you stand out amongst that fog. That is what I think flash does for your lure. I think flash helps that bait stand out and be seen and tracked and hunted and eventually eaten, hopefully, in lower visibility situations. Like a flashy spinner bait or chatter bait or underspin or whatever it is versus just like a regular Senko in dirty water is kind of like a car with its headlights on or its headlights off. And you tell me which one is going to be easier to see from further away. So don't overlook the importance of flash on your baits. Now, the next question should be, well, what type of flash and when? Well, if we start in terms of season and kind of go from there, I think it's all over the place because it depends on where you live too and what your bait fish are doing at any given time. So for example, up here in Ohio in the fall, when those shad are all grouped up on our big lakes or rivers and fish are actively chasing them around, flash is great. That's an easy one, right? That's kind of a no-brainer. But let's go to like more of a sneaky instance. So around here in the wintertime, we have fish that are hugging the bottom, and those fish seem to start to key more back in on like darters and craws and things like that that actually go along the bottom. Then flash can be great too, but you have to use it differently. So in that instance, I might crawl and underspin along the bottom to try and look like one of those little darters that's rummaging around in the rocks. That flash is still important, but it's a lot more subtle and it's in a completely different area of the water column. So then comes the question, what about like sunny versus cloudy days? And I've gone back and forth on that over the years, like 20 times, I feel like, because part of me says, hey, flash should be more important on sunny days because it's more natural and fish should be seeing more flash off of those real bait fish because the light source, the sun, is brighter, so it plays off of those real bait fish more. Then real shad, real gills, real minnows are shining more on those bright sunny days because there's more light penetrating the water to reflect off of them. So that makes sense to me. But then I can also convince myself of the opposite too. I could say on cloudy days when there's less flash in the water because the light source isn't as strong, then my flashy lure stands out more and can get bit more because the real bait fish aren't shining so much. So my bait is more of like a beacon on those cloudy days. Or I could say that I think I need to throw flashier baits on those cloudy days to catch what little light there is in the water to have the same visibility as a less flashy bait on a sunny day. So I can do mental gymnastics all day long about which I think is better, flash or no flash on sunny versus cloudy days. But at the end of the day, I just think flash gets bit. It gets bit by smallmouth. It gets bit by largemouth. It gets bit by spots, chatterbaits, spinner baits, underspins, inline spinners, tail spins, blade baits, spoons. You could go on forever, right? Some of the most successful baits in the history of bass fishing have relied on flash over a lot of other characteristics. And I think as much importance nowadays as we put on, weighting and fall rates and ultra finesse and matte finishes and super light line mid-strolling, hover rigs, all that new age tackle don't forget the flash. So that's my advice today. Any season, anywhere, flash can work. Slow rolling a chatterbait in the summertime, burning a spinnerbait in the fall, ripping a blade bait in the winter. Just be smart about how you incorporate that flash. All right, everybody. The next thing I want to move to here today is our Tackle Talk Pro Tip. And this week's pro tip comes to us from none other than your reigning Bassmaster Classic champion, a phenom in every sense of the word in competitive fishing. He is a college champion, a two-time Bassmaster Open champion, the 2025 Classic champion. It is, of course, Easton Fothergill. So Easton's tip that he sent for us this week on the Tackle Talk Pro Tip says, when fishing a Neko Rig, or any other bait for that matter, the first thing that I change is the size of the weight. The fall rate is the most crucial piece of the puzzle when trying to dial in a bite, especially with a Neko Rig. So there you go. That tip right there is from a guy who just won $300,000 on a Neko Rig. And as the Neko Rig becomes more and more popular by the year, like I feel like I'm seeing it a lot more these days with these super dialed guys on tour reaching for a Neko Rig way more than they did, 4 or 5 years ago. Easton gave us a pretty simple tip for dialing it in. If you have to focus on one thing, focus on the fall rate. Now, not only is he telling us what he thinks is most important, but by nature, that's also telling us what is not the most important. So what else could he have been focusing on? He could be focusing on the color, the length, the overall profile, the scent, but he's not. He's saying, hey, the number one thing that I'm worried about isn't any of those things. It's the fall rate. That is, in his words, quote, the most crucial piece of the puzzle. And then, did you catch what he said right at the very end? This is Tackle Talk. I'm a stickler for details. We leave no stone unturned here with these pro tips. He says it's the most crucial piece of the puzzle when trying to dial in a bite, especially with a Neko Rig. So he's also kind of saying in general, not just in Neko territory. Yes, it's important, especially in Neko Rigs, but in general, he believes that the fall rate of baits in that same family is the most important part of dialing in a bite. So I would venture to bet that Easton puts a ton of emphasis on his fall rates of his Texas rigs, of his wacky rigs, of his free rigs, of his Neds, any sort of finessey mid to bottom bait. It sounds like fall rate is his key. So as a bait guy, if I'm out there throwing a Neko Rig and I'm not getting bit, it might not be the worm. We shouldn't be so quick to rush to a new color or a smaller or larger worm or a different profile altogether. It could just be falling too fast or too slow for those fish. So I would assume for more pressured fish, more hesitant fish, they probably like a slower falling Neko a lot of times. So that's probably the direction that I would at least go up or down the ladder to start. If I'm not getting bit, I usually try to start going lighter before I start going heavier. But I also guarantee that there are situations where those fish are getting a good enough look at that bait when it hits the water initially that it's just not getting down to them fast enough, and they either catch on or they lose interest because the fall rate is too slow. So in those cases, you actually want to go a little bit heavier than you started out to see if you can trigger those fish and sort of minimize that time between when they first see the bait and when it gets close enough to them to really catch their interest and draw a bite. So there's your pro tip this week from a guy who won over $250,000 and the most coveted award in bass fishing on that exact presentation earlier this year. Pay attention to your fall rates with your Neko Rigs, straight from our friend and Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, Easton Fothergill. All right, next up here, let's move into this week's fishing poll, which is our weekly listener poll here on Tackle Talk. And this week, I went for something that was a little bit more fun, maybe slightly contentious, but something that has nothing to do with the fishing part of fishing, but the entertainment part of fishing, coming off the heels of our conversation that we started the show with Ken Duke and Brian the Carpenter over at Bass After Dark about the entertainment side of fishing. And our question for you all this week was, who is your favorite professional fishing league to watch? Is it Bassmaster? Is it Major League Fishing? Is it the NPFL? Or option D, you don't watch professional fishing? Now, hear me out here. The thing that I'm actually most interested in this poll, honestly, is not even which of the three is your favorite to watch. It's how many of you choose option 4, which is that you don't watch professional fishing. Because option 1, 2, and 3, I feel pretty confident that I know what order those are going to go in. I think Bassmaster will take the top spot. I think MLF will be semi-close in second place, and then I think NPFL will be a very distant third. But the wild card is, how many of you actually don't watch professional fishing at all? Now, the one thing I could be wrong on, I think, is the disparity between Bassmaster and Major League Fishing, because I think, if I had to be completely honest, I think Major League Fishing has made strides in the right direction in the past couple years, and I think Bassmaster has stayed pretty much the same, maybe even lost a little bit with the departure of Zona and no real bona fide star personality to fill his spot yet. So you need someone like funny, somebody witty, someone who can just hold the attention of the crowd, and I don't think they've really found that person yet. But both of the broadcasts for Major League Fishing and Bass, I think, are just missing personality and relevance to your regular Joe out there. But I will say, I honestly do like what Bass is trying to do with their like halftime show that they're running at a lot of these Elite Series events, where it's a little less stuffy, it's a little less analysis, and it's more of like a recap with some fun little segments and trivia and that kind of stuff. I know the jury is kind of split 50-50 on whether or not people like it, but I do. But then on the flip side, I like what Major League Fishing is doing with the on-screen indicators, with who's using live sonar and who's not, the move to use it 1 period and then 2 without it. I am still a little nervous about the whole Bassmaster coin flip thing. I think this year will be very telling, and people will have a lot of feedback on whether they like that or not and what direction Bass goes moving forward. But overall, I would probably put Bassmaster number 1, Major League Fishing a close second, at least closer than it's ever been since its inception. And then NPFL is a very, very distant third, but they are at least creeping into the conversation with the amount of talent that they've been able to attract over the last few years. And their whole complete no live sonar angle gives them a unique hook and a quirk to them. I think it still feels a little too pros versus Joes at the moment, but I do think that it's shifting. So let's jump into these results here. I'm going to click this button. I'm going to look at these for the first time. I'm anxious to see what you guys said, and clicking. All right, there it goes. Okay, I was sort of right. Yeah, I think I was pretty much right on this. We did get the order right of the 3 leagues, but I will say that I think I severely underestimated how many of you don't watch pro fishing at all, and that is very interesting to me. So of the 3 choices for the leagues themselves, Bassmaster was your winner at 44% of the vote. That is substantial. 44% to Bassmaster. Second place went to Major League Fishing at 28%. So there's a telling data point right there. 16% difference between Bassmaster and Major League Fishing. Now, I would be willing to bet if you did this same poll 2 years ago or 3 years ago, the difference was probably even greater than that. So I would guess, a couple years ago, it was probably, 20, 25% difference, if not more. I think Major League Fishing is doing really good work. They're closing that gap a little bit, even if there is still quite a bit of gap to go, it looks like. And then third place, very close to a statistical non-factor here, was the NPFL at 3% of the vote. And then here's your big one. 25% of you said that you do not watch professional fishing at all. A quarter of you said you don't watch. And those are people that are invested enough to follow and listen to a weekly bass fishing show, but they do not watch professional fishing at all. I think that's telling. That should be a wake-up call to these professional circuits, because those 25% are who you need to capture. They love fishing. They love learning about fishing. They engage with fishing media. Obviously, this is a fishing podcast, but they don't engage with your product, the professional sport of fishing, at all. And that's a poll from a very niche audience of Tackle Talk listeners. Imagine if you widened that poll a lot. What if you polled like everybody who has bought a fishing license this year? I would bet it is way over 90% of people that have bought a fishing license this year that do not watch any sort of pro fishing, probably even more than that. Those are the people that you need to try and engage with and make fans of the sport, not win over eyeballs from Major League Fishing to Bass or from Bass to Major League Fishing. That's a trivially small number in the grand scheme of things. So very interesting info there. Thanks for participating. As always, keep an eye on our Instagram and our Facebook stories. That's usually where those are going to end up if you guys want to participate in an upcoming fishing poll. All right, everybody. And finally here, we do have time for a quick mailbag question. I do have one pulled out of the batch here. I promise we will do a full mailbag episode to catch up on a lot of these soon. I know we are behind on submissions for the mailbag. We'll get a lot of them knocked out here in the coming weeks. But this week's mailbag question comes to us from Terry, who says, "Hey, Andrew, my name is Terry, and I'll make this quick. One question that I've wanted to know, everybody says to slow down in the wintertime, but is there ever a time to speed up? What gets fish active in the wintertime? Thanks, Terry." Okay, Terry, let's have a go at this. Thanks for writing in. I appreciate it. What gets fish active in the wintertime, or when can we actually speed up our approach in super cold water? I would say my overall thought here, I'm going to give that to you, and then we'll try and go in a little bit more detail. I think cold water bass, especially smallmouth, but largemouth too, will chase things vertically and move quickly vertically, but are reluctant to do so horizontally. So what do I mean? I think it's easier to get fish to shoot up 10 feet to eat something in the wintertime than it is to get a fish to shoot or chase 10 feet to the right or 10 feet to the left or track something along the bottom. So in bait terms, that fish will chase and eat like a blade bait that is ripped right in front of it as it goes up, but it won't eat a crankbait as easily that's going warp speed side to side along the bottom. So that's why like a vibey, a steel shad, a binksy, even a Johnson thinfisher or something like that, those type of baits just flat out work in the wintertime because it's at least more of a vertical up and down presentation. Like if you're able to, I don't know, like this is going to sound silly, but if you could strap a Fitbit to a blade bait and track its steps, you might cast that blade bait only 50 steps from the boat, and wherever it lands, if you just walked back to the boat, it would be 50 steps. But that blade bait is logging like 500 steps as it comes back to the boat because it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, not just across in a straight line back to that boat. So it's almost like if you looked at the graph on an EKG, if you were hooked up to that, heart monitor at the hospital, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's still kind of moving right to left a little bit. It's still scrolling and going horizontal a little bit, but most of the water that it's covering is vertical. It's up and down, up and down. And I think you can get fish to hit an active, aggressive bait in the wintertime if that's more of your presentation. So some other baits I think that can fit that mold, if you wanted to throw something like a lipless crankbait, you can do the same thing with a lipless. That's why they are such a deadly bait in late winter and really, really early spring. Also, you can toss something like a minnow bait that's so popular nowadays and just work that up and down in the water column as you're coming back. Raise it up a little bit, let it fall a little bit, raise it up a little bit while you're still giving it those twitches. It's almost like you're ice fishing that bait. If you've ever been ice fishing, right? When you're ice fishing, you want to keep moving that bait and twitching that bait ever so slightly. Even if you're just kind of raising it up and down, you're raising it up and down with a twitch in your hand. I just think my best, quote unquote active or aggressive wintertime baits are baits that capitalize on that vertical movement and attraction over horizontal. That's why a jerk bait is so deadly in the wintertime, because fish will still come up to eat or at least look at something like a jerk bait. Now, a lot of times, the fish that I catch in the wintertime on a jerkbait, I might have actually pulled off of the bottom within the first few twitches of that rod when I made that cast, but I don't get bit until, the middle of the cast or near the very end of the cast. It can take a while to draw those fish up, but a lot of times they eventually will. To go back to ice fishing, if anybody who's ever ice fished has used like a flasher or a Vexilar or something, they know that firsthand. The more you can raise that fish off the bottom with a Vexilar or some sort of traditional flasher, the higher likelihood you seem to have to actually catch that fish. So at the end of the day, I hope that helps a little bit. Like blade baits, lipless baits, minnow style baits, jerk baits, just focus on your bait and your action trying to draw fish up vertically more than horizontally. All right, everybody, that is our episode today. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I appreciate you all. As always, if you want to catch up with us, you can find us on the web, tackletalkpodcast.com. You can shoot me a message on Instagram or Facebook at Tackle Talk Podcast. You can also shoot us an email. It's tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.